Father John from Canada. It's been a long time since Father John has called in.
Yeah, we've had him on a couple times, but not recently.
Yeah, Father John, how are you doing?
Oh, good. How are you guys?
We're doing well. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, actually, first off, I actually wasn't expecting to call you, but I ended up getting home way early, so I was able to phone in. I actually was at the grocery store, and I saw, while I was in the checkout, these little squirt bottles for Kool-Aid. So I actually bought one to remind me that eventually I promised to phone in eventually again. And so I made myself some Kool-Aid. I haven't had this since I was a kid.
So you're actually drinking Kool-Aid while you're talking to us. That's awesome.
Okay, yeah. Well, let's see if we could not drink the Kool-Aid in the conversation, though.
All right. What can we do with you today?
Okay. Well, first of all, I should apologize because the first two times I phoned, I didn't really understand what your show was really all about. Because I came on without an argument prepared. So I just basically wanted to have a discussion because that's generally what the Orthodox are supposed to do, not necessarily what they do. So I did promise to phone in again, so I came up with something to argue about rather than just...
Okay, what topic do you want to argue about?
It's the Peripatetic Axiom. Are you familiar with that?
I might be familiar with the principle, but I don't know if I'm familiar with the axiom. Could you describe it?
Well, the principle is nothing is in the intellect that was not first in the senses.
Okay, so it sounds... so is this...
Aristotle basically founded the Peripatetic school, and like this is the basic of classic Greek philosophy, and then Thomas Aquinas adopted it, and that's the basis of empiricism. Yeah.
Okay. So really quickly, the first thing when you say that, it sounds like you might be drawing a distinction between your senses and your mind. Is this an argument for a dualist worldview? And just for people who don't know what dualism is, the idea that there's a spirit that's separate from your body.
Yeah, many have used it for that. Aquinas argued that the existence of God could be proven by reasoning from sense data. That was...
Oh, God. Is this Reformed epistemology again? Okay, so I actually...
All the arguments... Oh, sorry. I was just going to say all the arguments on your show are actually based on this. It's all using sense data, empirical evidence, and arguing from that for God. So, so this is basically kind of the heart of the matter.
Okay, so I kind of took this in a different way than supposing dualism. I know the word mind is like a little bit of a red flag for people who are not dualists. But my take on this, John, is nothing enters the brain that the senses have not first processed. Is that essentially correct? Like, in order to get to your brain, you have to have sensory data?
Yeah, that's basically what this axiom says, yes.
Okay, what about dreams?
Well, you're arguing against the Peripatetic Axiom?
Well, I'm playing around with the idea. I'm curious where dreams fit in that, because I've experienced things in my brain during sleep that I am not actually sensorily picking up.
Oh, interesting. Okay, where did that come from?
Right. That's my question. If you're saying everything comes through the senses, then my question would be, what about...
I'm not saying that. Aristotle said that. Thomas Aquinas said that. That's the basis of all Western philosophy, the basis of basically everything that took on in the West for the last millennium, including new atheism. So that's the basis of it all. David Hume's basically said we should stop arguing about that because we can't prove it.
Well, I'm not saying that I disagree with it necessarily. I'm playing around and giving you some things to think about.
Completely.
Well,
no, the thing is that I do completely disagree with it. I don't agree with it at all. It is the basis of atheism, Roman Protestantism.
Okay, so you laid some groundwork here. I'm not sure if I agree because I think B's got a good point, but I want to know where you're going with this.
Yeah, I'm curious because
what's your view?
Yeah.
Well, I'm just wondering if you guys disagree with it. I'm curious as to why that is and how you argue against it. Because, all the Western philosophers for the last millennium have said, this is just, we have to accept this and not bother arguing about it.
Sure. Well, I don't think it's so simple to completely reject, but I think that there's more to it. It's kind of a yes and thing.
I think that if we're going to be talking about things that we can actively prove in the real world to the other people's satisfaction as being real things, it's a good basis. Like if we can say, hey, these things are detectable via the senses. Anyone with these senses can detect this. Therefore, that's a pretty good basis that that thing is real for the conversation to continue. But I also think that just like any philosophical axiom or claim, especially ancient ones, right? There is more to the conversation. And a lot of the time we tend to have discovered things about the brain that might contradict or add on to these things, right? We understand a little bit more about how the brain works and how it stores the memory of sensory data so that it can recycle it during sleep. So technically, we could have a conversation about whether or not that counts as the peripatetic axiom. But again, this is a philosophical conversation. I will get sucked in very quickly if you don't stop me. Where is the God claim or supernatural claim in this? Or is there one?
I'm not making any God claim. I'm not making one. I'm just arguing against, I'm saying the Orthodox do not believe in the peripatetic axiom. And
Okay, what do you believe in?
Yeah. Where does stuff come from?
Well, see, the thing is, if I start talking about this, we would get into a discussion, and there's no more argument because I'd be talking about something completely unknown to you guys. And
that's not how science works, and that's not how I understand it. So if that's not how anything else in this world works, right? So if you and I were to discuss cars,
I would agree with you with that.
Right. Yeah, and I mean we wanted to talk about a car engine, then we would talk about internal combustion. But if you didn't know how an internal combustion engine works, we'd need to stop and understand that. I don't.
Well,
why are you bringing in a completely out
and argue against it?
Okay, so
you guys are not too sure about it,
No, we didn't say we're not sure about it. We said it's a yes and thing. See, here's the thing, John.
Okay.
John, here's the thing. I've had a lot of conversations with apologists who really, really, really want to dump me in a bucket and then attack the bucket. And the interesting thing is, it's just not that way when you deal with actual people. Right, unless you want to create a straw man. And so we do have nuanced views that we're happy to discuss and listen to you and talk about. But what we're not going to do is we're not going to dump you in a bucket and attack the bucket.
Right. You don't need to worry about whether or not it's an argument or a discussion. We prefer discussions as long as it's a back and forth and we can play with each other's claims and ask clarifying questions. That's absolutely fine. And those usually work best if you make a claim. Or ask us to make a claim, right? And say, okay, so John, where do you think stuff in your brain comes from?
Yet.
If not your senses?
I haven't made my argument. Right, I haven't made my argument, so I would like to hear that. Because, you guys are talking within a paradigm which I am not coming from.
Okay, go for it.
My argument is that this whole idea of the peripatetic axiom, that nothing is in the intellect that was not first in the senses, was never, ever in the senses to begin with. Where did it come from to begin with? It's just an idea. So that in itself, it's actually a self-refuting axiom. It doesn't work.
It sounds like
actually the fault of all Roman Catholicism, Protestantism, the Enlightenment, and all the development.
Well, hold on a second. No, you don't get to claim the Enlightenment, buddy. The Enlightenment happened after the Dark Ages. That was where the Catholic Church was really thriving.
Yes, where Roman Catholicism totally controlled all of Europe. It was the way the Franks dominated Europe. Yes, I agree.
Hold on.
The Orthodox had nothing to do with that.
Okay, hold on a second. Before we dive into a completely different, separate area, let's bring it back to you wanting to argue against something that we have a nuanced view on, and I think we're talking past each other now.
Well, yeah, that often happens because words change, and I prefer to use the original meaning of the words that are often a couple millennium old, which is really problematic. Even the word Catholic is different.
Yeah,
Yeah,
which
I
is why
agree.
we need to understand what people mean when they say words. That way we're not talking past each other.
So my understanding of what you're saying, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, I'm going to try and put this into like a nice little package. You are saying that the very fact that the idea that nothing in the mind is not in the senses first was not in the senses, then it refutes itself, because how could you think that thought if you didn't perceive it with your senses?
Right.
Okay, that's what I thought you were going with.
Okay.
All right, now we can talk about that.
I don't know if there's anything to talk about. I think we're capable of metacognition. Our brains, our brain can talk to itself. And because of that, we're not entirely reliant on outside stimuli. And so to say that somehow that's a founding, block of
No, here's
being
the
an
thing.
atheist or something, I don't understand.
I don't think he's saying it's a founding block of atheism. I think that there is nuance to the idea that
Or
everything
skepticism.
in your brain comes from your senses. I think as far as empiricism goes, it's a good starting place for sure. But there's a larger conversation to be had there. My question for you, John, is why did you pick this? I'm curious where this fits into your theology or your worldview that informs what you believe, because that's kind of the goal here, is to figure out what you believe and why. So I'm bought in to the idea that it's more complicated than that sentence. I'm sure that if I read a book on the subject, it would also be more complicated and I might change my mind again. But based on this one sentence, I can agree that it is reductionist to an extent. So now what? What does that do for your worldview?
Well, the thing is that this is, from how I understand the West, this is the basis of Western philosophy for the last millennium, and this is how the Orthodox are different.
Well, I think maybe,
I can agree that you're different. Is different better?
well, I even if
I don't know. It all depends. I mean, if your basis is something that cannot be proven, I mean, that's specifically why David Hume said we just can't prove this, so we just have to accept it and move on. And that's what did happen. So the progressions that happened after that, people just kind of ignored this, not even worry about it anymore.
Okay, then why are we talking about it?
Blind faith.
Then why are we talking about it? It sounds like you haven't given us anything to talk about other than giving us a definition of something we both agree is reductionist or is not, fully what we agree with. Okay, cool. Now what?
Oh, well, I wasn't expecting that. I assumed you had known the background of where theoretical atheism came from, the history, this development. So I didn't realize that you would disagree with this axiom.
Have you considered that?
Pretty good.
Have you considered that?
What is radical atheism, and how does that tie to Hume? That's interesting. I'd read that paper.
Well, and how does?
I didn't say radical. You misheard me. I said theoretical atheism, as opposed to atheism as just self-God.
Okay. So what is theoretical atheism?
Friedrich Nietzsche called that one because he saw, Protestants and Roman Catholics, and he realized that they're just dealing with a theoretical concept of God. They're not actually have God. And in that sense, he was correct.
Okay. So it sounds like you are saddling us with people that are not on the call and are not alive even. John.
Yeah.
Where are we going with this other than talking about you're disagreeing with people who are not here?
Are you saying that because you think that the peripatetic axiom is not accurate, that everything that was based or uses that in any way is automatically false and should be discarded?
Well, I'd say if you're trying to argue against God or for God, yes, it should be discarded.
Okay, why?
I mean, if you're just dealing with empirical knowledge, I mean, that's all you're dealing with. But if you're dealing with something beyond empirical data, I mean, you can't argue for or against God. It's just ridiculous to even do that.
Okay, so if I can't argue for or against God, isn't the accurate and theoretically honest way to go about that is to say, I don't know, and leave it at that?
Well, no, I didn't say. I said you can't argue with it with empirical knowledge. I mean, you can't leave that out.
So, Oh, okay, hold on a second.
So here's the thing. Here, look.
Okay.
I know you have feelings.
Go ahead.
Here's my concern here. I don't necessarily agree that because this axiom doesn't cover all eventualities that it is useless, or it makes everything based on it or using it useless. It's a possibility that we can find true things through faulty tools. That is a possibility. We have tested a lot of the claims that have come since this introduction by Plato or Aristotle, excuse me, and they have borne out, right? So we cannot say this one building block has issues, therefore we're throwing away the entire building. That's not how it works. Also, even if I were to agree with you that, oh yeah, actually everything from the Enlightenment and the Catholic and Protestant religions on are just now built on a foundation of sand and will crumble into nothingness, you still have to provide an alternate explanation, right? You have to provide an other way of looking at things that is convincing to us. And so that is kind of where I'm at right now. I'm willing to have a conversation about whether or not this axiom is useful, whether it's accurate, whether we can use it reliably. But even if we can't, that doesn't mean that you're right. That just means we need to go back to the drawing board. And I'm curious what you're drawing on that drawing board, John.
Well, I can tell you, but why is it that I have to convince you of it?
Well, because otherwise we're not going to,
That's the point of this show, John.
Fine. I don't have to convince you of that.
Okay, then why are you calling?
When he was talking,
John, hold on. Why are you calling if you don't want to?
Because I promised I would call again, and you wanted something to argue against, so it was this. Okay. If you want, I could tell you my beliefs, but then we would not be able to argue against it.
Why not?
If you don't believe, that's fine. I am not obligated.
No, hold on a second. Hold on. Wait, so are you saying that you can do that with anything that you believe, right? If you just don't believe it, that's fine, right? Maybe if I were to bring you data that was pivotal to your finances, but if you don't believe it, that's fine. No, you're just as, no, man. We live in a shared world. We live in a shared universe. And because of that, there are things, right? Either your claim about God is true, or it's not. One of us is wrong because both of us are in disagreement about the God claim, right? So don't you care about which one of us is right, or does it just not matter?
The thing is, I haven't made any God claim, and I've just explained that any argument within the empirical point of view, you can't argue for or against God. It's just ridiculous.
You can.
And then when you go
Hold on, no, John. Just because data disagrees with you doesn't mean you get to throw it out. It means it disagrees with you, right? So we can take a look at claims in the Bible. We can take a look at whether or not the Exodus happened. We can take a look at whether or not a global flood happened. We can take a look at whether or not iron chariots prevent God from getting involved, or whether or not so many people getting together and praying means that God will make true on earth what is true in heaven, right? Or make what is it? True in heaven, what is true on there are so many different claims that are made in the Bible, and when you test them, so far they haven't borne out. That is evidence, and that is evidence against the claim you're making. Just because it's not evidence for your claim does not mean that you get to disregard it. So far, you're not operating at a 0-0. You're at a loss, sir. You need to actually present evidence. You can actually provide, right? So do you think, hold on a second, do you think that the Garden of Eden was real?
The thing is that
do you think the Garden of Eden was real, John?
Materialism.
John, let me walk you through this. Was the Garden of Eden a real place?
How about I walk you through this? I can actually tell you
John,
where I'm coming from.
Cool. Start your show, and then you can do that. Otherwise, listen and let's walk through this. John, was the Garden of Eden real?
Yes.
Okay, where?
Well, now you just stepped into empiricism.
Oh, but you said it's real. Hold on a second. Aren't real things empirically showable? Like what real thing can you show me that you cannot discuss?
Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. So it's real, but not necessarily real.
No, I never said that. You don't seem to understand that there's something beyond empirical evidence.
Like what?
And this is what I'm talking about. Everything that the Orthodox believe is not within empirical evidence.
Really? Because I can
That sounds
empirically.
like an exhausting way to look at the world,
Yeah,
honestly.
I mean, I've been to Wittenberg where Martin Luther posted the 95 Theses. I can empirically show you that that's a place that exists. I can empirically, demonstrate a historical record with evidence back to, that time. I can show you Lutheran.
So what
right?
What is your point? What is your point? What is your point? So what? You're talking about empirical stuff that you see with sense data. Yes, I'm saying that the Orthodox receive everything they believe from something beyond that.
What's that?
Everything that is empirically obvious is something that we deal with. We interact with it all the time. What I'm talking about is noetic knowledge.
Okay.
There we go.
Let's discuss this.
Thank you. That is what I wanted. What is this noetic knowledge?
Now,
why should we care about it?
Well, if you don't care, that's fine.
No, we're asking you because you obviously care.
Well, right. Well,
Okay,
when
so
Christ talked and people walked away, he let them walk away. Not only did he let them walk away, he turned to his apostles and said, will you leave me also? So the thing is, I am under no obligation to convince you of anything. If
Then
you
why
want,
did you call the
I can tell you
show?
what I believe. There's no debate.
Do you care about?
Arguments? I'm going to argue against the Peripatetic Axiom.
Okay.
Wait, so you're saying that this one axiom that was created initially during the time of Aristotle, who had a horrendous idea of dualism, of idealism, of how the universe actually worked, is not technically accurate all the time, therefore you're automatically right?
No, you're not. You're not counting noetic knowledge, but he's not telling us about it because we won't believe it, or he doesn't have to.
I wonder if noetic knowledge works into neural network.
I doubt it.
Kind of like how the brain is actually physically developed to...
Well, you're completely wrong since you're talking about the brain, and that's not where noetic knowledge is known.
Okay.
Oh, got it.
So what is noetic knowledge?
Something beyond. What is noetic knowledge?
Mm-hmm.
It is the center and the heart of the heart.
Okay, I can
Do you
pull
think
out a
with
heart.
your heart, John? Do you think with your heart?
It's from noetic knowledge that you receive true theology. I mean, that's the basis of Christianity. But
True theology. Okay.
In the West.
Okay. It sounded like you didn't answer V's question.
Do you think with your heart? Does your heart has the capacity to think?
It depends what you mean by think.
Do you process any information in your heart that then impacts how you think about things?
I think generally how you're using it, no, that would not be. It'd be more along the lines of being intuitive rather than...
Okay, all right. I just wanted to make sure we were on the same page there. So you don't get your inner wisdom, this direct knowledge in your heart. So where is it? Where does it go? It's not your brain.
Yes.
It's not your brain. It's not your heart. Where does it go?
Wait. The thing is, I'm trying to understand what you're saying here. So the thing is, you do not reason. You do receive direct knowledge, yes. Noetic
Where does it go? Where is this direct knowledge processor located in your body?
It's not a processor. See, that's the thing. You're looking at it from a materialistic point of view, which...
You mean a realistic point of view? There's a difference.
How do you process information without an information processing capacity?
Don't process it. It's not like that.
Maybe you haven't processed it, John.
Technology. Well, that's fine. I mean, that's specifically why Paul said, we're fools for Christ's sake. I mean, the word fool there, if you look at the Greek, it's from which we get the word moron. So if you want, you can call me a moron.
Well, I won't do that because you did call the show and we appreciate you talking to us. But if you're not interested in actually convincing us of a thing or defending your position, that's kind of the whole goal of the show. So if you would like to call again and do that, we'd love to have you on. But in the meantime, thanks for calling.
As I said, I can't. I didn't come on to argue. The only part I can say is argue against the Peripatetic Axiom, the whole thing. And all you guys will talk about is within sense knowledge. You don't even look at this. So, I mean, there is nothing for me.
It's not a one-to-one equivalence, John. Arguing against the axiom is not arguing against all sense data. That's not how that works.
Okay. I am arguing against...
That's a philosophy 101 thing. Right. I mean, I assume you know that, right? Either it's the claim or not the claim.
This is beyond philosophy. This is not philosophy. That's the thing.
It's theology. It's theology, right, John?
Right.
Right. Doesn't theology assume that the God exists in the first place?
I got it.
Well, no, it doesn't take an assumption. It has to come with knowledge that's actually received.
But not through your brain.
There's no
Yeah.
processing. As soon as you start
Okay.
if it's coming from yourself, the only thing you can be sure of is that you're wrong. So that's what I'm arguing.
Yeah, no, hold on a second. Hold on. That's not what you've been arguing. And if that was what you were arguing, we would have shut this down a long time ago. John, just because we can't have absolute certainty of a thing doesn't mean that we're wrong necessarily. But let's just dive. You know what? No, that's okay. John,
thanks for calling.
Thank you for calling in. When you can sum up where your God antenna is and how that God antenna translates information to you, we would love to know.
Absolutely.
Take care, man.
I can't phone in again because this is the only thing that I can argue. I could tell you.
Wow, that's a bummer. Bye, John.
Well, guess we'll never hear from John again.
Oh, that's a shame.
This is the thing though. Like, this person teaches other people. This person gets up onto a stage or a dais or a pulpit or wherever he preaches from, and he teaches other people. I'm assuming from the Father in his name. But if you don't have anybody holding you accountable, then this is all going to sound very metaphysical and wise and good. And people are going to go, I see, that makes me feel things, therefore it's true. But Jesus Christ.
Well, here's ultimately where it lies, is when you get that kind of practice in, what people tend to want to do is they tend to try and skew the conversation to where they're a little more comfortable, and then we'll go in that direction. And I know I'm guilty of that, and I know you're guilty of that, and he's definitely guilty of that. And so in response to the questions that we had, instead of responding and going down that course, he then shifted to something that he could make a statement about. It's an uncomfortable place to explore things that you aren't fully confident in or you don't know. But the whole point of moving forward as a society, as a species, is exploring those uncomfortable places.
Also, like, just so you know, for future calls, whoever you may be who has the goal of making us think you're very good at philosophy, pick other philosophers to talk about other than Nietzsche and Aristotle and Hume. Like, everybody knows a little bit about them and can throw that out. Like,
yeah,
it doesn't impress me personally to have more. In fact, if you come to me and you say, well, all philosophers, and then you throw out a bunch of random names from different periods, different thought processes, different worldviews, and say they all agree with you, probably I'm going to think less of your philosophical knowledge.
Yeah, because it sounds like what you did is you sat down and worked up a script. And that's just not how conversations work.
Or how philosophy works.
Yeah.